Today we will be reading My Name is Truth, The Life of Sojourner Truth, written by Ann Turner and illustrated by James Ranson. Before we begin reading, we are going to predict what this book might be about by looking at some of the pictures. By looking at the cover and the title of this book, what do you think it'll be about? On this page, what do you think these characters are doing? Who might this baby be, and why might they be running? By looking at this picture, how do you think this character feels? What might this character be saying? Who might all of these characters be in the crowd? Do they look like they're listening? Lastly, do these characters look happy? Now that we have predicted what this book might be about, let's begin to read and see if our predictions were correct. My mama was a slave woman called Mau Mau, with sweet arms and eyes like a hawk. I had a daddy too, bum free. They loved all 12 of us and had to see us sold off one by one like horses for work. Their hearts most broke. Do we need to change our prediction about what the characters are doing? Mama told me to look up at the stars at night, shining over my brothers and sisters. We never hardly saw them again. Her heart had 12 holes in it, I know. I got bought for $100 when I was 9. At least they spoke my tongue, Dutch. Next place, I was bigger now, worth $150. They did not speak words I knew. I was always getting beat. Once he fired up a bunch of green sticks in the fire, hardened like stone, and beat me until the blood ran. Those marks will never go away. I can feel them like ridges under my dress. Then Master Dumont bought me. He was not so bad, but the mistress was evil. They thought my back was a cart for hauling rocks, wood, timber, and grain. I worked hard as a man. Did they ever see me, Isabella, under those loads? Time came, he said. Isabella, you are a good woman. You can go free 1 year early. But he broke his promise. I determined to leave. I owned myself now. I was not a slave. I spun 100 pounds of wool to make up for leaving, crept out the door in the darkness. My baby Sophia clutched in my arms and ran and walked and ran and walked for miles looking over my shoulder. Would he chase me? Would he not? Until God showed me the way to find a kind family that took me in, the baby too. Were our predictions of who the baby is correct? Do we know now why they are running? Welcome, they said. Had anyone ever said that word to me before? And showed me a fine, wide room with a white bed to sleep in. I never slept in a bed before. Just let me creep under and it will be like a shelter of leaves. Finally, sleep came to my eyes. Were our predictions correct about how this character feels? Worked for the Van Wagenens for a few years, then the terrible news struck my heart like lightning. The evil Dumont mistress sold my son Peter away down south. They are not allowed to do that by law. I marched up to the Dumont house to meet that lady. I want my son back. Get me my son. She laughed. What a lot of fuss over a little colored boy. But I demanded my son back. I felt as tall as a tree inside, courage racing around inside my heart. I got lawyers to help, and finally Peter came home again. His back a mess of scars, his soul too. Frightened of his mama at first, but he came to know me at last. I worked in New York City for a while, won't spend long on that. Met some bad people, some good ones, but God was leading me east to preach. I left at dawn, and God spoke in my heart, a new name that fits me, like a new dress made just for me. Now I am Sojourner because I travel far and long to tell the news of God's truth. In meetings and gatherings, people like to hear me talk. I think with a name like Sojourner Truth, a body has some respect at last. Do we need to change our prediction of what this character is saying? I found a new home in Massachusetts, at a silk mill where all men and women were equal. I was happy there, bought a little house, my very first, and preached even more. One night at a camp meeting, there was a bunch of rowdies kicking up a storm. I was afraid they'd come for me, the only colored woman in the crowd. I hid behind a trunk. Then my heart spoke. Sojourner, are you weak? Isn't God with you right now? I strode out and climbed onto a wagon back, spoke and sang and preached to those rowdies till they were calm. Is there anything we need to change about our predictions of who these people are and whether or not they're listening? Something about my voice is like a blanket on a fretful baby. Then at times, my voice is like Gabriel's trumpet, firing people up, telling them the good news of salvation and the terrible days of slavery. People just can't believe an ex-slave woman can speak truth and power. Once at a rally, a man jumped up and shouted, "You must be a man. You are tall as one, powerful as one. You want me to show you I am a woman?" I threatened to open my dress, but others made him back down in shame. I showed them my truth then. I've told my story to Olive Gilbert, a kind woman at the mill in Northampton. I see all those words creeping across the page as she writes. I never could make sense of writing or reading. I will go on the road again, selling my narrative of Sojourner Truth, and the photographs of me. Those shadow pictures bring in money to feed the real woman. Sometimes I sit in amazement in some fine living room, remembering I was a slave, working in sweat, beaten, sleeping on hard floors. Now I sleep in a real bed and rally others with my fiery words. I think of my daddy, my brothers, and my sisters like 12 shining stars. I will see them and my own children again someday. Mama will put her sweet arms around me and I will be home at last. Were we correct about how the characters are feeling in this picture? Now that we have read the whole book, we can look back on our original predictions. On this page, we now know this is Sojourner and her parents working in a field because they are slaves. We now know on this page that Sojourner is running away with her baby from slavery. Here we see Sojourner sleeping in a bed for the first time, and she is so happy. Here we see Sojourner Truth telling the news of God's truth in meetings and gatherings to anybody who likes to hear her talk. On this page, we see Sojourner calming down a bunch of rowdies who were kicking up a storm. Lastly, we know these characters are happy because this is what Sojourner and her mom will look like when they are home at last. You all did a wonderful job predicting what would happen in this book. Even if all of our predictions weren't correct, you all made adjustments as the story went on. I hope you all enjoyed listening and reading along to this story about Sojourner Truth and her life.